Thank you so much for joining me today on Just Praise Him Radio. I'm your host, Glenda Lomax, and my job is to inspire you to a closer walk with Christ. Now here's the show. Hello, believers. Welcome to the Just Praise Him radio show. I'm your host, Glenda Lomax, and the title of my message today is How to Know If You're in the Wilderness. I want to help those of you who are entering or who are in a wilderness season to identify where you are so you can get out of it more quickly. God gives us stories in the Bible to show us things about His personality, what He likes, what He doesn't like, and how He responds to different actions that we do as His people. The wilderness is a terrifying place. The Israelites traveled through it for more than 40 years as God attempted to teach them about Himself. They had not heard from God in many, many years and had only old stories of Him passed down to discuss among themselves. So really, they didn't know Him personally like we have an opportunity to, okay? There are patterns throughout all the Bible that if you continue to read it and you read the stories again and again, you'll start to see. One of these patterns is that God's people again and again, after obeying Him and then being blessed, would go out and chase after other gods and worship them instead and begin doing evil. And after a period of time, if they did not repent, God would allow evil to come upon them. Just as God led the Israelites through times of refining in the desert, He also leads us into times of refining in a spiritual desert season in our lives. These seasons can be terrifying for us. I've gone on I don't know how many wilderness journeys, but even one feels like too many when you're there. Times in the wilderness are times of great uncertainty and change. They're usually times of great lack. I was 38 years old the first time I went into a wilderness season. I had only been saved about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And I was working in my career in the oil and gas industry. And all of a sudden, I had no work. I had no place to live. I had no money. And it was as if I was standing there one day, everything is fine, and then my life just fell apart around me for no discernible reason. And everything was completely out of my control. And I've seen other people enter wilderness seasons where that happened to them. They lost their job, they lost their house, their wife left them or their husband left them, and it was just one thing after another. And I want to explain to you why that happens and help you to identify if you are in a wilderness season, because if you know you're in a wilderness season, you can partner with God. There are things that you can do to partner with Him to make your time there shorter. If we don't know we're in a wilderness season, and I didn't in that first one, I had no idea what had happened to my life. Can I just say that? I didn't know what was going on. And I was scared to death, but I didn't know anything that I tried to do about it. Nothing was working. So if you come upon a wounded animal in the wild, and let's say you come upon a little red fox and it's got a broken leg, and you want to try to help it, if you approach it and try to help it, it is going to fight you with everything in it, isn't it? Okay, when we enter a wilderness season and we don't know we're in a wilderness, that's how we react. We fight it because we don't understand that it's to help us. So we will fight it with everything in us. We just want to get back to what we were doing, right? We just want our life back. But when the Lord takes those things or allows those things to be taken from us, in a wilderness season, God is trying you. He's refining you and He's proving you. But He is also proving Himself to you. He's proving to you that He and His Word are both true. He's taking more of our fleshly nature, the part of us that wants the things of this world, out of the equation, and He's filling that empty space with His Spirit. The end result is a lot less of us and a whole lot more of Him, and an increased understanding of Him, and an incredible intimacy with Him, because we've spent that time alone with Him in the desert. When you come out of a desert season, you will often have a very powerful testimony that has the ability to reach others for Jesus, okay? The wilderness is a terrifying place. It was for the Israelites, and it is for us too. A wilderness experience is something that usually happens in the lives of a Christian that is about to be promoted to a new level of anointing. But the greatest reward of walking through the wilderness is the intimacy you gain with the Lord. When you walk through fiery trials with somebody and you survive them, then you'll have a closer bond with that person because you experience things in the fire that you don't experience at other times of your life. And only others who have also walked through that fiery place truly understand. Like the brave men and women of the armed forces who have fought on the battlefields, they'll tell you intense battles will bring out the best and the worst in us. And when you battle side by side with somebody, you share both fear and courage. You weep tears of sorrow and tears of joy, but you weep together. The wilderness that the Lord takes you through is not a physical place, but a place where you learn things about yourself and about Him that will strengthen your faith and will strengthen your walk with Him. No matter how many times you go through this type of faith walk, each time it will challenge your faith in a new area, and it will challenge your faith all over again. Sometimes it challenges you to believe more completely or for more of your provision. You may start out in the wilderness believing for lunch, for one day at a time, and end up believing for the income to pay all your expenses all the time. Sometimes a new wilderness walk will challenge you to believe in an area where your faith has not been built up yet, like in healing, for God to heal you of something. You might think that if somebody survived one wilderness journey where God provided for them miraculously for a whole year, that they would never doubt His provision again, but that's not true. They will have more faith than they did before, but not necessarily enough faith to enter their next wilderness journey with complete confidence, and maybe not any faith at all in the area where they're tested next time. God desires us as His people to continually grow in faith, to continually be strengthened in the knowledge of who He is, and that He is a loving Father, faithful to provide for His children. 1 Peter 1:6-7 says, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ." I was 36 years old before I came to know the Lord. I was not raised in church, but my mother was a Christian. She talked about Jesus, but I never really understood why Jesus died on the cross or anything like that. And I really didn't want the restrictions that I saw in the Christian life. I didn't understand any of that. I just knew you had to follow a bunch of rules. So I really wasn't trying to get saved. And, God just kind of meets you where you are when people are praying for you. And my mother, God bless her, may she rest in peace, never stopped interceding for me the whole time I was just being silly out there. Until finally one day, that was the day, and the Lord says, yep, this is the day she's going to do it. So, not long after giving my life to the Lord, I only knew, I think I knew 2 scriptures when I got saved. I think I knew ask and you shall receive, and then there was some other scripture I can't remember right now that I knew. So, I was working in oil and gas, but I was traveling with a seismic crew. It was a lot of hours of work and not all that much pay. But I was okay with it. It was real hard. It was 7 days a week. There were no breaks, and they were 10 plus hour days, so it was pretty grueling. But not long after I got saved, weeks later, I asked the Lord for another job. I had heard that doing what I did, contract instead of on, a salary, paid better. And so I wanted to try that. I knew my job real well. And I knew how to run records in the courthouse and everything like that. So I knew what I needed to know to do contract work. I had enough experience. So I went to the Lord that night and I said, okay, you're God, so this should not be a problem for you. I mean, this is literally how I talked to Him back then, y'all. I just was so ignorant. I wanted another job doing the same kind of work, but making twice as much money. That shouldn't be hard for you since you're God. And I'd really like for it to be in Louisiana because I've never worked there. And oh, by the way, I'll need a new truck because I'm driving a crew truck and I don't have anything to drive. So I told him what kind of truck I wanted, and I wanted a V6 engine because I wanted to be able to save money on gas because I knew I'd have to travel because I was in Oklahoma when I said this prayer. And I said, your word says, ask and you shall receive, so this is me asking. I was challenging Him because if He was really God, and I had evidence already because He saved me that He was, then He could bring me the job I wanted and the vehicle to go with it. And I was like, show me what you got. I just threw it on out there. Well, He not only took the challenge, He shocked me. Within a week, 1 week, I had a job offer. And I was not going out applying for jobs. This job found me. And when the man who offered me the job was talking about how much money they would pay me, I was praying silently and I said, Lord, is this it? Is this the job? And the Lord didn't say anything. So I asked the man, I said, can I think about your offer and get back with you? And he said, sure, no problem. So for days I kept praying about it and the Lord didn't say anything. The Lord talked to my mother, so I assumed he would talk to me too. I just never doubted that. So a week later, this guy calls me back. And as soon as I answered the phone, he said, that wasn't enough money, was it? And I just said, no, it wasn't, because I didn't know what else to say. And then he raised his offer, and immediately the Lord spoke and he said, take it. God knew that they would pay me more money. And he knew that I would work like a dog for whoever I was working for. And he wanted me to get the best deal because I was his kid now. So when I hung up the phone, I started praising God. I was really excited. He had just given me a job paying not 2 times as much, but 2.5 times as much as what I was making on that crew. He was showing me, not only was he God, but he could do better than what I asked for. And he did it fast. So he didn't just take my challenge, he raised me. And I was set to start that job in South Louisiana 2 weeks later. So immediately I called a dealership in the town that I had come from and talked to the salesman I knew down there and told him what kind of truck I was looking for. I said, you got anything like that there? And he said, I want a new one, because I knew I was going to be on the highway. And I didn't want to break down because I don't know how to work on cars. I do not know anything about working on vehicles. So the next day, the guy called me back and he said, I've got this, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, run my credit and tell me how much I need to put down. And I'll come down and sign the papers on it. He called me 3 days later and he said, I've run your credit through 6 companies and nobody will finance you because you never borrowed that much money before. And I said, well, run it through some more because that's my truck and somebody's going to approve me. The next day he called me back and Bank of America had approved me. And it was my truck and it was exactly what I had asked for. So within a month of giving my life to the Lord, I left Oklahoma for a contract job in Louisiana where I wanted to work, making more than double the pay that I was at when God saved me. And I began spending every possible minute listening to Bible teaching and in prayer and worship to Him. I remember so well that first year, it was just every minute that I had, I was listening to the Bible, I was listening to sermons, I was listening to anything I could find about the Lord because I was trying to learn about Him. And I started reading the Bible, but I didn't understand it at that point. None of it made any sense to me yet because you can't understand the Bible until He opens it to you. Now, I didn't know that then, so I was still trying, but I got a lot more out of the sermons when I listened to them. So I go to South Louisiana, and I worked down there for, I think it was about a year. And in that year, my walk was mostly stumbling and falling down because I had been 36 years in the world doing whatever I wanted to do. So there was a lot of sin in my life, and I had prayed about that, and I said, Lord, I know all the sin isn't just go away overnight, so if you'll show me one sin at a time to deal with and you'll help me, then I'll try to do what you tell me to do. So after that year, after the work I had ended, I went back to Western Oklahoma and I rented a little house because I was so tired of motel rooms. And I got my stuff out of storage, and kind of set it up and everything. And all I had was a few $1,000s that I had put back in savings. So I was living on that and just trying to be careful, and I took a job as a waitress working part-time to kind of supplement that because I wasn't sure what I was doing there. I knew that He had basically sent me there. I mean, the work ran out, that's where I was, but I didn't know where we were going with all that. I got involved in a church while I was there. Eventually, the money ran out that I had saved, and all of a sudden, the place where I was waitressing cut my hours from the 3 days a week that I had, which was okay, to 3 hours a week. What are you going to do with 3 hours a week at $2.19 an hour? So I knew that job was over. I realize now, though I didn't know it then, that was the brook drying up. If y'all read the story of Elijah, he was out by the brook Cherith. God had told me to go to the brook Cherith. He said, go to the brook Cherith. The ravens are going to feed you there. You can drink water from the brook. You'll be okay. And eventually, the water started drying up. And as the brook was drying up, the Lord said, I want you to go to Zarephath. There's a widow there that I've commanded to feed you. Well, most widows in that day, especially during the time of famine, couldn't even feed themselves. But Elijah knew God, so he obeyed. And I am sure that if he had stayed by the brook Cherith, it would have completely dried up and the ravens would have stopped bringing him food too. Okay, so the brook was drying up. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any work, so I couldn't pay my rent anymore. So I laid down to take a nap one day, and I was really seeking God, saying, Lord, I don't know what to do. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. I can't stay here. I don't have any money. And the Lord showed me to go and stay with my dad for a little while. Now, my dad had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had lung cancer, stage 4, and he had a year and a half or less to live. And my sister in Amarillo had also been diagnosed with a terminal illness. At the same time, both of my children were going through trials. My son was going through trouble, and my daughter had filed for divorce from her husband. So I was in so much pain, just with all the people I loved were in pain. So I go to stay with my dad, and I get a little temp job in Dallas to, make gas money. And I was talking to oil and gas companies, calling oil and gas companies looking for work, and there were 3 different companies that said, we'll hire you as soon as the job comes in. What I did not know, because of my inexperience at that time, was oil and gas had cycled down and there was no work, and none of those jobs would end up coming through, but I didn't know that then. So I'm working a temp job. I'm making less than $10 an hour. I was commuting between an hour and 20 minutes each way every day in Dallas. And everything just started falling apart. I had bill collectors calling me. I couldn't rent a place because I didn't have enough money. I didn't have a permanent job where you can't rent a permanent place usually if you don't have any work. You have to show that you can work, pay the rent. I couldn't rent a place. I didn't want to stay with my dad anymore. My dad had a controlling personality, and after I'd been there a few weeks, it started creeping out, starting to tell me, how long I could be on the phone, what time I had to get up every day, this and that, and what time, everything. He was just had my whole day planned out for me there. And it was very difficult. All my previous comforts were gone. This is something that I would learn over subsequent wildernesses, was a trademark of the wilderness. One of the signs that you're entering a wilderness season is one by one, your comforts begin being taken away. My comfort was home is my refuge. If I have a house where I have my little nest, then that's my comfort zone. And that's everybody. We all, have a home that's where we're comfortable. So that gets taken away. And in a wilderness season, it is very common to have to go and stay with people you really would rather not go and stay with for very long. They are almost always people you have unresolved issues with. I did not know that either at that time. And the Lord is giving you an opportunity to resolve those issues. And of course, my dad wasn't going to be there very much longer, so this was kind of like a last chance to resolve issues with Dad. Another sign of the wilderness is, your life is crashing down around you, and you are helpless to do anything about any of what's happening. You can't save yourself. Let me put it that way. You cannot save yourself from what is happening. Everything that is happening as it crashes down around you is out of your control. 100% of it. One of the signs that you're entering a wilderness season is your life has changed drastically by means outside your control. When I went from being in my career in oil and gas and working every day and loving that kind of work to, for a while in Western Oklahoma, kind of walking around with a big question mark on my forehead because I had no idea what was going on, and then to living with my dad, commuting to Dallas again, which I had not done since the mid-'80s when I was married, and making very little money, which was a big change from oil and gas. But it also, I was not accustomed at that point to not having enough money to pay my bills, because I'm a hard worker. I'll work however many jobs I have to work. In oil and gas, I only had to work one job. I just worked a lot of hours at it. But one of the main signs of the wilderness, that you have entered a wilderness season, is that drastic change, and the fact that all of what is changed is outside of your control. You can do nothing about it. And one of the main signs is all your comforts are taken. And the Lord will generally move people away from you that can rescue you from the wilderness, or He will move you away from them. My mom was in Western Oklahoma, so He took me, and she would have done anything in her power to rescue me from anything I was going through. And He took me away from there. Both my grown children were also in Western Oklahoma. My sister and her husband were in Western Oklahoma. That's where almost all my family was, up there. So He moved me down to Dallas. So there you are. Everything's crashing around you. You're unable to save yourself from everything that's happening or to change your circumstances in any way. When the Israelites went into the desert, They had no way to take care of themselves. There's not anything in the desert but the heat and the snakes and all that. They could not go back to Egypt, and they could not go on to the promised land because only the Lord knew the way to the promised land. He was the only one that knew where it was. It is the same with us. When the Lord leads us into a wilderness, it's like being in the middle of a dark bridge. You know you can't go back to where you came from, but you can't yet see where you're supposed to be going either. You're stuck. He does not make a way of escape from the wilderness because he wants you to be where you are. And when God leads you into the wilderness, there is no one who can lead you out but him. And if you go any other way, you will be in sin, and you will end up in a worse mess than you're in already. But God is very merciful. You know, he led the Israelites. He lit their path at night with a pillar of fire, and he led them in the day with a cloud of his presence, wherever they were in the camp. And he'll lead us too if we'll believe him to do that. And he'll cover us with his presence as we follow him. So another sign that you're in the wilderness, and this one's hard, is God will be silent. The reason that he does this is because the teacher is always silent during the test. He's waiting for you to get it. Matthew 4:1 says, "Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil." Y'all remember that? The wilderness is a place of testing and training for us, like it was for Jesus. It's kind of like God's boot camp, okay? He got out in 40 days because he passed every single test. There was no sin in Jesus. He never sinned. We seldom get through it that quickly because we're kind of more like the Israelites, though hopefully we don't take 40 years. The most important thing you can do in the wilderness is to seek God. Ask the Lord to reveal to you what it is he wants to show you that is in your heart that he wants changed. Try not to freak out when he's silent because the teacher is always silent during the test. Okay? Another sign that you're in the wilderness is you are way out of your comfort zone. I was way out of my comfort zone when I was down in Dallas. I didn't want to be alone in a city like that. And when I will never forget as long as I live the day I was sitting out in my truck eating a peanut butter sandwich for lunch from my temp job on my lunch break. And I was, calling the oil and gas companies trying to find out when I could get out of there and go back to my life. And they were all saying, "Oh, nothing's come through. And I remember hanging up after I'd called the third one this one day. And I said, "Lord, you're not leaving me here, are you?" And this realization came over me. And my blood ran cold. It scared me so bad that I thought I was going to be sick. That's how bad it scared me because I was alone. I had no money. I only had this little job that paid less than $10 an hour, and I had obligations to pay. And I believe in paying my bills and paying them on time, early if possible. But here I was alone in this big city. I was so scared. I mean, I was still staying at my dad's house at the moment, but that wasn't going to last very long because the commute was wearing me out. So I was way, way out of my comfort zone. The wilderness is not a place of comfort, and generally there is no comfort to be found there, other than the comfort of his word and his presence when you seek him. This is one of the strongest signs that you're in the wilderness. Another sign that you are in or entering the wilderness, there is a lack of or conflict with your provision. In the wilderness, there's often no regular provision, meaning paycheck, because we're usually all on the paycheck system, right? We go and we work our 2 weeks, we get a paycheck, we go and pay our bills, and we go back and we earn the next paycheck. Okay. Not having regular provision is a trust test. He is teaching you to trust him for the other provision you don't have, okay? A sign the Lord wants to teach you how faithful he is to provide is when you don't have provision. You don't have a regular paycheck. This was the hardest part of the wilderness for me because I have always worked. I started working, I think I had my first job, I was 12 years old. And then I had a babysitting business for a couple of years, and I had my other job where I met my husband. Originally I was 15, working one summer to earn school clothes money. I mean, I just always worked. I come from a long line of very hardworking people. It never occurred to me not to work. So that was the hardest part of the wilderness for me, having always worked and made my own way. I always had a plan for how I'd provide. When my kids were teenagers, I worked 2 jobs and sold cosmetics on the side so we'd have enough money. But God wasn't interested in my plan. He wanted to teach me that he is my sole provider and that he could shut down my plan anytime he wanted to, and he did. It is a wonderful thing to be able to believe God for 100% of your provision, and I do that now. and have for about 7 years. But it is absolutely terrifying when you are first learning how to do it. Can I just tell you that? Another sign that you're entering or in the wilderness, everything in your life or multiple major things seem to be going wrong all at the same time. I still remember as I was being led into that first wilderness in 1998, I felt like my life was just coming unraveled all around me. My eldest sister being diagnosed terminal, my father being diagnosed with terminal cancer, my daughter getting a divorce, the oil and gas work running out, and not being able to work full time until I went, down to Dallas. And I was using credit cards to pay my bills because I didn't know what else to do. Another sign that you're entering or have entered the wilderness is you are under tremendous pressure. It is coming from every side. The enemy is attacking you. He's telling you you're not going to make it. Everything's going to be cut off. You're going to be kicked out in the street. You're not going to have any place to live. You feel like you're in a pressure cooker that is fixing to blow the lid. In the wilderness, we want to scream, where's my promise? But the Lord wants to get us from where's my promise to the land of, hey, I know who holds my promise. I know who holds the answers. I may not know the answer, but my Bible says, my God shall supply all my needs. He wants to get us to that place where that just rises up out of us and answers those problems. The bottom line is, if the Lord has led you into the wilderness, you will be there until you learn what it is He wants you to learn. The best thing you can do while you're there is seek His face by praying, by reading His Word, fasting, listening to His Word, and continually asking Him to show you what He wants you to see. Once you get what He wants to teach you, you'll come out, usually into a time of great blessing. The children of Israel walked out of that desert after that 40 years, strong against their enemies, praising the Lord and willing to defeat the giants in their promised land. And the Lord gave them great inheritance and help and blessing in all they did, as long as they kept walking in His ways. Deuteronomy 29:5 says, and I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes are not waxen old upon you, and thy shoe is not waxen old upon thy foot. My prayer is that all your journeys into the wilderness will be short ones, that you will quickly see and grasp what the Lord wants to teach you there. May you come out of every one in excellent health and with wealth in your hands. Jesus bless you. Thanks for listening. Y'all have a great week. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Just Praise Him Radio. You can contact me by mail at my new address, JPH Inc., Glenda Lomax, P.O. Box 60, Glencoe, Arkansas 72539, or by email at jphtoday@gmail.com. JPH is not affiliated with any nonprofit organization, church, or denomination. Have you ever gone through a time in your life where suddenly it just felt like your whole life was falling apart? I call these experiences the wilderness experiences. Wilderness experiences are a time of great uncertainty and change. There are times when our faith is tried and refined. After many experiences, the Lord spoke to me to write The Wilderness Companion, which is a virtual roadmap through the desert times of your life. Find out why you've been led to the wilderness. Find out what the biggest hindrance is to receiving provision in the wilderness. Find out what the 7 temptations of the wilderness are. Drastically cut the time you spend in the wilderness by learning how to partner with the Lord instead of working against Him. Every Christian needs to read The Wilderness Companion. It's by Glenda Lomax, and it's available on Amazon.com or wingsofprophecy.com. Amazon.com, The Wilderness Companion by Glenda Lomax. Do you know someone suffering from domestic violence or another form of abuse like verbal abuse? Did you know abuse has deep spiritual roots that cause abuse to be attracted to a person throughout their lifetime? Now, the Escaping Abuse Study Guide helps you discover and remove those spiritual roots so you won't be an abuse magnet. Get the Escaping Abuse Study Guide or get one for a friend. Available now on Amazon.com. Escaping Abuse Study Guide by Glenda Lomax. Available now on Amazon.com.